As with our other presentations, they'll be recorded and posted on our website along with PDFs of the presentations that you see here. So there'll be both the video recording and the slide deck on our website. Welcome to the 2022 Trails Conference. I'm Steve Cleary, Executive Director of Alaska Trails, and we're excited to have you here today. I'm zooming in from Anchorage, and Anchorage is part of the traditional homeland of the Eklutna Dena'ina. Alaska Trails recognizes the stewardship of the Dena'ina on whose land we live, work, and recreate. We have some sponsors to thank for this year, including ConocoPhillips, Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Alaska Recreation and Parks Association. These sponsors have been consistent throughout the years, and we're really grateful for their support to be able to offer this event to you for free. Thanks to those of you who supported us through a conference donation, or other ways to support us include volunteering with our Alaska Trail Stewards program, donating through our website, or Pick, Click, Give, which just ended, as most of you know, but we're grateful for those who have donated, and we appreciate your continued support. I think we all got a good look at the schedule, but we hope you will stick around for the rest of today's workshops, and then join us tomorrow as well. Please continue to use that chat function to introduce yourself and also for any questions. And now I will invite Teresa Martinez to go ahead and share her screen while I share her impressive bio. So for over 30 years, Teresa has worked professionally to increase awareness, engagement, and access and stewardship of our entire national trail system. She's a graduate of Virginia Tech, and she holds a BS and MS from the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife in the College of Natural Resources. She's a lifelong recreationist, and from 1987 to 2007, she worked for the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. And from 2007 to 2012, she worked for the Continental Divide Trail Alliance. And since 2012, she has been the executive director and co-founder of the Continental Divide Trail Coalition. She serves on the Trail Leadership Council of the Partnership for the National Trail System, and has served as the chair of the Federal Advisory Committee to aid the U.S. Forest Service in the development of the Pacific Northwest National Scenic Trail. She is actively involved in the creation of equitable spaces for all people in the outdoors, and currently serves as the acting chair of the board for the Next 100 Coalition. In 2019, Teresa was honored by the Virginia Tech College of Natural Resources as the recipient of the Gerald Cross Alumni Leadership Award. When now working on behalf of one of our national trails, Teresa may be found exploring trails in and around Santa Fe, New Mexico, by bike, horse, and foot, and is always up for a discada with friends in cool outdoor places. Teresa, thanks so much for being here. Please take it away.
Thanks so much, Steve. Good morning, everyone. I'm also laughing because there's a train running right behind me. So if you hear either little clip clops, my dog is running around this office and there's trains. So welcome. It's the new world. But thank you, everyone, for inviting me to be your keynote. I do always feel weird doing things like this because I always feel like I'm no one special. I never wanted to start a nonprofit. I never wanted to be an executive director, and yet here I am. And I couldn't be happier, actually. I'm working the hardest I've ever worked, having the most fun I've ever had. And I'm thrilled today to share with you 10 years of experience, at least 10 years of experience at the CDTC with you, along with some of our learned lessons, in hopes that it inspires and fuels even more success for your work along the Alaska Trails effort. As Steve mentioned, I am Teresa Martinez, and I am so privileged and honored to be the executive director of the Continental Divide Trail Coalition. I work side by side with the Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service, communities, partners, tribal nations, and the general public in the cooperative stewardship of the Continental Divide National Scenic Trail. I am zooming in today from Lordsburg, New Mexico, probably as far south as almost you can get from Anchorage in the continental US, and on the lands of the Chiricahua Apache Nation. And hopefully today you'll find some of the insights and items I share with you helpful for the work that you're undertaking. And I just, in opening, want to share, no matter what happens in the future and as it unfolds, it's something my dad said to me when I was like 20 years old and I just graduated from Virginia Tech. He said, "What you're doing is noble work." And I know what he means now is that there's nothing more important than connecting people to the outdoors in whatever way they seek to connect. And that when we help formalize trails specifically, we recognizing that trails have always been a part of our life and from the dawn of time. When we work to create a community, though, centered around trails, especially long ones, we create an opportunity to bring people together in ways that we can never have imagined. We bring people together from all walks of life, perspectives, backgrounds, and it allows us to create relationships and understanding with one another. They allow us to connect intimately to the landscapes we exist in and depend on for our air, water, and food. And maybe most importantly, they nurture our minds, hearts, and souls. So with that framing, I would love to get started. So first, just a little bit of background around the CDT. Many of you may know this. And I don't know, can you see the entire screen or does the little pop-up? Is it okay?
No, it looks good.
Okay, good. Okay, just checking. In Zoom, it's always weird. So the CDT was designated in 1978. It is 3,100 miles long and it goes from border to border. Literally, when you're in New Mexico, you stand on the border of Mexico and New Mexico, 80 feet from Mexico. There's no wall. There's a broken down 6-strand barbed wire fence and a monument right on the Roosevelt easement, the first inch you can get outside of the Roosevelt easement. And then of course it touches Canada in the International Peace Park with Waterton National Park at Goat Haunt and Waterton, Glacier and Waterton National Parks. It goes through 5 states, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. And since designation, it's had some fits and starts. But today, we were really beginning to thrive 45 years in. We're finally beginning to thrive. And partly that's because of the development of the Continental Divide Trail Coalition. While yes, there was another organization, the Continental Divide Trail Alliance, that formed in 1998 and lasted until 2012. It actually closed its doors in 2012, which I'll talk about briefly. But for CDTC, our mission, first of all, we are the lead national partner working side by side with the U.S. Forest Service, BLM, and National Park Service in the cooperative stewardship of the CDT. Our mission is to complete, promote, and protect the trail by building a strong and diverse trail community, providing up-to-date information to the public, and encouraging conservation and stewardship of the trail, its corridor, and surrounding landscapes. And it is work we've been doing for 10 years. It's really hard to believe it's been 10 years, but the gray hair on my head tells me it's been 10 years since we launched this organization at this dining room table that you see here in the picture in Denver, Colorado. Back then we were, and probably still are, a ragtag group of folks hoping to create a grassroots-based community honoring and acknowledging the past while also looking toward the future. Our focus from the beginning has always been to reimagine what a national trail is, reimagine what an organization stewarding it could look like, and most importantly, reimagining what partnerships of a broad coalition could accomplish if we did our work well. And here we are. The first 2 years, our efforts were mostly voluntary, and then slowly, one by one, part-time to full-time, we began to add permanent staff. We started with a $4,000 budget in 2012, and this year we have $1 million, if not more, coming in the door. We now support the work of 14 full-time employees, and we're actually getting ready to add 3 more in the next 3 months. It's insane. It's scaring me terribly, but here we are. Someone once called us a scrappy organization, partly because we make things happen, and we often hit way above our belt. And we take this as a compliment and as a testament to the people we get to work with and alongside day by day, because this is definitely a we, not a me endeavor. Because of the way we formed in 2012, which was in response to the closure of the Continental Divide Trail Alliance, where many of us had actually worked or were working when it's closed its doors, we knew the 4 of us were sort of the brain trust of the trail. And as someone told us in that time, if we had to be the ones to form a new organization, because if we didn't, the wrong people would. And so we decided if we were going to do this, we had to do things differently. From fundraising to the values we based our work on, from how we spoke to how we listened to who was at the table. As we had those meetings at the dining room table in Denver, we came up with a list of guiding principles that to this day show up in almost every aspect of our work, in all of our relationships and efforts. and they are, I'll just run through them real quick, but you'll hear them repeatedly through the next couple slides throughout the rest of the presentation. We always make sure that people joining our effort have a commitment to the CDT, its corridor and landscapes first. That is the paramount. People can't come for other motives. It has to be about the trail. We always leverage our strengths. We don't duplicate efforts. That means we focus on the 80%. Only we, an organization with a sole mission dedicated to the CDT, can focus on, and we partner then with everybody for everything else. And that means we then create an incredibly huge coalition of people who love this trail. We want to diversify funding, so we limit how much federal funding we get. We only, in our grand scheme, we said we would never receive more than 30% of our funding from the federal government. In the last 10 years, it's never been more than 18 to 20%. We also value every $1 donor the same as we value every $500 donor. And sometimes we put a little bit more value on the $1 donor because we know if we have 500 of them and we do our job well, they might become $500 donors. And so we really want that grassroots, broad public support of the CDT. That's more important to us. We know we need to have a reserve. And so this last year, we just launched our first endowment to really achieve that goal in earnest. We show up as a real partner who invests as much as we receive, if not more. We stand to scrutiny, we listen, we invite in critics to help us address the issues they raise. So if you ever have a problem and you call me, I'm gonna be like, yeah, help me solve it, just so you know. We remain accountable for our actions and apologize when we mess up. We don't just focus on through hikers, but all the people who love the CDT, and we embrace all users. So when we have to figure out difficult solutions, we have relationships to help find them, which brings us to that we are relational, not transactional. We are grassroots based, and we are always in service of the trail and the communities it connects. We are strategic in our planning, and we always remain forward looking, trying to anticipate how we're going to have to remain adaptable and flexible in what's coming our way, which is also why we use technology to our advantage. We recognize that we are a nonprofit, but we are a business. And so it's okay to make money. And so we make money because it's all in benefit of the trail. We want to reimagine stewardship. So we are creating a culture, not adapting one, which is an opportunity for us to really define the values, how we want to move forward for everything from how we engage Indigenous perspectives to all users and everything else. We stay flexible, responsive, and utilize traditional knowledge when it's shared freely with us. We create a bigger table, not just for people at the old one, because all people, all faces who love the Continental Divide, not just the trail, need to be included. Indigenous voices must be included and supported, which is why we always acknowledge that the CDT is on stolen lands. We realize the CDT is different. Unlike these other big trails like the AT or PCT, we don't have access to many population centers, but rather the communities, populations, needs, values, and national significance of the people themselves is unique to the rural Rocky Mountain West, and we don't want to change that. We are transparent, especially in our financials, because of the past experience of CDTA. Our board is grounded and representative, and it is not an echo chamber. They definitely sometimes talk a lot about a lot of things, which we love. We see failure as part of success, but we also know that this public-private endeavor that we have created cannot fail again. So how does this show up for all? There's a lot, I know, and you'll hear these themes repeated here and again. So how does this show up for us? Well, first of all, the biggest ways we see the trail is more than an 18 to 24 inch tread. It is a connector of communities, cultures, and landscapes that spans 3,100 miles along the Continental Divide. And as the major watershed of the North American continent, it provides water to over 180 million people. It is a migration corridor of wildlife and humans, and it holds the history, traditions, and connections of communities. Through all of our work, relationships, and efforts, we remain focused on keeping this CDT and its surrounding landscape the ground to all we do. And we always check ourselves, we always remind ourselves that this is our ground. And this is important because the trail, like many trails, long trails, is not complete yet. And the trail hasn't been completed for many reasons. The main one being that long trails are legacy endeavors. They just take lifetimes. The AT took almost 100 years. They take time and should take time because they are relational endeavors. Our goal is to provide instead sound principles and frameworks that provide sideboards so that when the trail is completed, we can remain flexible and adaptable within those sideboards, but that as new segments and projects come on, they stay consistent within those sideboards and ensure that the CDT thrives along with the communities along them. This has led us to reimagining the stewardship of the trail in the way we look at this, because the trail isn't done. And because CDTC is so young and we are creating our culture, we decided very early on to take a long look at how we looked at the divide itself. National Scenic Trails, which many of you may or may not know, were created for two main reasons: to protect the nationally significant cultural, natural, and historic resources of a place or setting, and to provide a recreational experience to enjoy those resources. Many organizations focus on the experience, which is important, but we see the trail as a corridor. So we asked ourselves, how could we possibly promote a trail along the major watershed of the North American continent if the nationally significant features of that landscape weren't protected first? And so we began to focus on the resources of the corridor, not so much the experience, and knew that if we did the resources well, the recreational experience would naturally align. So we began to document the natural, cultural, and historic resources of the corridor. And as we did, we began to understand how to better protect the corridor and complete the trail. The effort has also allowed us to create an institutional memory in this Atlas document, which I meant to put the link in, but I will share the links for some of these documents I'm talking about so you can see them. The effort allowed us to create an institutional memory of the CDT, of the trail, not just for CDTC use, because as many of us know, agencies too need this kind of stuff because federal agencies constantly turn over staff, which is fine, and it's a real thing. And we wanted to create a record of the priorities and projects and the commitments we had all agreed to. Even so, as turnover happens, it was easier to keep trail completion efforts more consistent and moving forward. And we could just be like, here's the Atlas. And we don't have to do all the explaining. And someone has a tool that is super helpful that in a snapshot, in a series of plates, can see what the trail actually holds. The Atlas has become our framework, allowing us to not only reimagine stewardship, but build a strategy of how to accomplish completion, protection, and appropriate promotion of the CDT. It's also helped us visualize the landscape in a way that we hadn't before and have a stronger understanding of what is both at risk as well as the opportunity to protect and steward the landscape, because there is a congressionally designated resource along its spine. It has also helped us categorize our work into 3 buckets. The first being completion and adaptive stewardship, because as we grapple with the dynamic systems all around us changing everything in our world in the last 2 years, if that's anything to remind us what's coming up in the future, I don't know. I hope we never have that again. But it helps us stay focused in these crazy times on the resources along the divide, while also giving us space to adapt to the changing needs and conditions of the resources and the people themselves, and to continue to prepare for what's coming down the road. So it's always looking forward. It's all given us a common language and goals, and that has strengthened the relationships between the agencies, partners, tribes, supporters, and trail visitors, because people can see the trail through a common lens. It's helped us all build a relationship to the CDT even, and expanded the people interested in participating in its stewardship, because they see this now as a landscape with a trail through it versus just a trail. So we get all this more information coming into the trail. The second area of our focus is in this gateway communities and partner engagement. We have always been rooted in grassroots communities. It's how we ensure the community-led initiatives that are driven by communities are driven by the communities affected by the outcomes of those efforts. We see our role, though, as a convener with expertise in CDT stewardship. So that's how we lend our strength to those larger community conversations. And when we are invited into those conversations, especially by communities, we see our role as helping to see all the different ways the CDT may benefit their community, and as an opportunity to listen and learn where the CDT is impacting their communities potentially negatively, so we can resolve issues should they exist. The last bucket we have been embedding all of our work in is in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, although we frame it as justice, equity, and accessibility in the CDT experience. We recognize that unlike the AT or PCT or many other trails in the National Trail System, maybe beyond the Arizona Trail and maybe someday the Alaska Trails, the CDT touches many rural communities that are often marginalized in many ways. And many of these, especially here in New Mexico, are often Native communities and communities of color. However, for many of these communities, especially Native peoples, the Continental Divide itself has been a center for their culture since before colonization. Part of our reimagination of the CDT is in who and how all people are engaged and recognized for their deep and strong connections to this landscape, and recognizing and acknowledging that the trail needs to serve them as well as the long distance through hiker. And this happens when they are at the table and as we expand access to the CDT in all its forms. Meaning it's not just having more trailheads, it's how we share and reflect the faces of the Continental Divide. So people see it as picnics as much as through hikes, for families as much as ultra runners, and it can be experienced by foot, hoof, and in some places by wheel and even motor. So how do we do this? It's a lot. Oh, sorry, there is a little extra slide there. We have a community first approach. And this is clearly stated in our current strategic plan that we center all of our work in communities, and specifically our Gateway Community Program, because it truly is the nexus of all our other efforts, from advocacy to stewardship. It's where all of our work truly begins. And I will also tell you, when you build a trail, that's just step one. Everything else that comes after is actually where the real work is. It's hard to build a trail physically. I know we've all done it, but the hard part is building that community. So we focus on that component because we learned from the past experience at CDTA, which was a very top-down culture, what happens when you don't have that grassroots support. And the thing is, especially here in the Rocky Mountain West, and I suspect it's very similar in Alaska, you don't show up, or anywhere in a small town, you don't show up in a community when you don't live there and say, hey, you should do this. Because this is also something stated in our current strategic plan, which is the effort to regionalize our efforts, including our staff. And so today, many of us in the communities at the Trail Connects, and we show up in service to those communities as a resident. And we are now beginning to hire regional representatives who are helping maintain relationships critical to our program efforts. We operationally do this in 3 ways. First of all, we engage and elevate voices. So through our Gateway Community Program, through volunteer trail stewards, our trail adopters, through working with small business owners, through hosting community events and listening sessions that give us opportunities to share stories through social media, we are it allows us to honor and acknowledge and raise awareness about all the efforts already happening on the trail and along the trail. Nothing that we're doing anything new. This is all the work that's already existing. We adapt and implement policies and efforts constantly. So we do have an in-progress working policy guide, which helps inform how we show up in things like forest planning or advocacy work. But it also helps us really ensure that we show up with volunteer and partner events. We actually annually have a Gateway Community Summit that allows us to hear back from all of our Gateway communities, what's working, what isn't working, what do they need, how can we support them better. We also always engage our Gateway communities and anyone locally with decision makers, so their voices can stand forward. We don't speak on their behalf, we let them speak on their own behalf. And then we get out of the way. And then we analyze and evaluate. We're constantly looking forward, looking back, looking forward, and it seems like a lot of work, but it's not, because at the end of the day, when you have something like a pandemic come in, you're ready to go. You've done all the planning. What is it Winston Churchill used to say? In war, planning is essential, but a plan is useless, because it's the process of figuring out all the resources you have and then how you can move in forward and backward. So we do resiliency and strategic planning very regularly. We are very transparent. We constantly report on what we're doing, and we're constantly facilitating connections to leverage even more networks into both what we're doing and helping support other efforts outside of the world that we live in day to day. So then I know a lot of questions come up about our Gateway Community Program. So this really is very important and central to all of our work. We see Congress says that National Scenic Trails should be protecting these nationally significant natural, cultural, and historic resources. And we feel this also extends to the communities themselves, because there is simply no other place like Pytown, New Mexico, or Silver City, New Mexico, or Lordsburg, New Mexico, where I'm sitting right now, or in Lincoln, Montana. And we want to celebrate them for who they are and support them to thrive in having the CDT come through them. And we know, based on small business surveys, which I will also share, we just did the most recent small business survey this year, and we're getting ready to release results from the Colorado Economic Survey. We know that people see the value of public lands, the CDT, and the potential for positive impacts to their communities through jobs, public health, and through growth of local driven and owned outdoor recreation economy efforts. And part of that is just building these relationships to help them understand that when they have something like the CDT running through their communities, they have an opportunity to leverage that for benefits. It's not just like, oh, there's these weird people walking down Main Street. It's more like, how can you leverage them and, you know, not just provide a beer, a bed, and a laundromat. How can you actually engage with them so you both become richer? And it's really working. The gateway communities for us are also our core effort, because everything is driven by our relationships with them, because they become our stewards, our supporters, our advocates, our volunteers, and most importantly, our eyes and ears. And we feel we have a strong duty to support their ability to benefit from having the CDT in their community. So this is where the Gateway Community Program really works for us. It is a designation program. They also lead. They come to us and invite us in. We don't come in and say, hey, you should be a gateway community. It's more like we have a program. If you would like to learn about it, let us know, invite us in. So that leads us to cooperative stewardship. It's kind of like a 1-2 punch. We have this gateway community program, and then we have the stewardship program. And because we connect to communities, we're able to just demonstrate, and we have all these partners, and we're this huge coalition. We have this high return on investment in cooperative stewardship efforts. As I mentioned, we only receive a small amount of funding from the Forest Service, but that isn't necessarily representative of the power or effectiveness of the shared stewardship relationship. Rather, because we really want to show up in partnership that leverages our strengths, this is actually also how we measure the success of much of our work. So how does this show up? In 2021, for just example, you'll see on the right-hand side of the slide, there's like 2021 return on investment. The entire National Trail System receives $30 million. 1.7 million of that goes to this Continental Divide Trail. It gets doled out to districts and partners and various youth corps and everything else. 253,000 of that went to partners, of which 168,000 of it came to CDTC. If you look on the bottom part, the red and blue graphs, you'll see that combined, we contributed almost $1.18 million and another 750,000 private dollars, 1.18 volunteer, the value of volunteer labor combined, that's $1.88 million. So for that small investment of $253,000 in these public-private partners, we're giving back $1.88 million of value to the American public. So when I go to Congress and I say, support our gateway communities, oh, and by the way, this little chunk of change you give us, this is what we're giving back to you. All of a sudden, decision makers come in and say, how can we do more of this? And so it may not always mean that we get more funding, but what it does mean is that the entire partnership, all of our partners, all of our communities benefit. And then when you have a small business owner come with you to DC or virtually in a meeting, and they can talk about how important it is to their community, it's like this really powerful story of how this can actually work in real time, and it works really well. And I think in particular with decision makers in DC, they kind of do this like, wow, that's awesome. Like you're not yelling at me, and two, wow, something's actually working. And so it gives you this leverage. And so I really encourage people to think about how you can leverage all of these strengths, because it really is a powerful thing. Okay, moving on. I know I'm running up late here. I'm going to try to blow through these real fast. So one of the things this is finally resolved in is recently, with this whole thing about 30 by 30 in America the Beautiful and all this other stuff, we came up with this Connecting Across the Continent report. And the reason we did this is because all of our work to now has led us to a broader understanding of how this shows all of our work can show up in a larger landscape protection that extends even beyond the CDT corridor, beyond the actual Continental Divide. So looking at all the ways the CDT and its landscape support a sustainable community-centered conservation effort, Again, and recognizing, building off the atlas, what is the value of the lands themselves, which we know, partly when you have these large landscape efforts, you have the opportunity to inform and improve public health, do economic growth, create connections, and actually protect the lands. We also know that when we're looking at the CDT, why that shows up and is so important, we know that some of the lands along the CDT are some of the most biologically rich areas of the entire North American continent. And no offense to Alaska, but southern New Mexico, between the Rio Grande and Colorado watersheds, are really some of the most critical landscapes to the health of the entire North American continent. It's so rich, and it's because it's all these transition zones. From migration corridors to connectivity and the watersheds themselves, the CDT is not just a trail, it is a major artery, if not the major artery of the North American continent. So its health affects us all. We must recognize this in all of our work because the landscape moves way beyond the trail and hikers on it. We have an opportunity for landscape conservation and doing it in a new way. Already, we are working with agencies, landowners, indigenous organizations, state governments, and local governments, and again, local communities, to build stronger alliances and opportunities to think out of the box in how we protect the CDT. And many of these are already locally led initiatives that we're just supporting with having this congressionally designated resource on it. And what that allows us to do is also address this concept of closing the nature gap, which is funny because when you think about the CDT, you just think of nature. But what we know is along the divide as a whole, we know many individuals and communities face significant barriers to enjoying places like the trail, even when they're in their own backyard. So as we can continue to think about beyond just the recreational component of the trail, we see that we have an opportunity, especially within gateway communities and tribal nations. And by moving people beyond just inviting them to the table, but cultivating relationships, we find so much more can be gained, often because many of these communities are already addressing the equity issue and have been for a really long time. All we do is show up with the CDT to say, if you can use this to help increase your effort and your success, please do so. And it is really helping move the needle. And it's helping us also reach audiences we've never reached before and in the right ways. And we tie this all back to our equity and accessibility in the trail experience because we are helping preserve and elevate and protect stories and places because we know that for time immemorial, people have walked the path of the continental divide. To ignore that is really wrong. We also know that we have an opportunity to foster the future generations of stewards through education programs, career development, and pathway programs through those partnerships with other people doing that as their strengths, as well as some of our own internal programming because we're leveraging our strengths. And because by building relationships, in particular with Indigenous communities, we are also gaining critical traditional knowledge and combining that with the best available science. We are engaging all stakeholders, sovereign nations, partners, and communities in the process. And we are supporting locally led solutions that will be successful because they are led by people who know their communities and are affected directly by the outcomes. And when we do all of that well, we gain the added bonus of infrastructure and transportation planning benefits because it can lead to additional financial resources that help all of us continually adapt all of our work and do even more with even more success while we're also remaining relevant and fresh in the work that we do. So CDTC, I've kind of taken you through this huge thing, but the difference is that 10 years now, when I look back and look forward, we've come a long way. We literally had 4 founders. We started with each of us put in $1. So we really started with $4. And we were all volunteer. We said one for all for one. If we can't all do this together, then we shouldn't do this at all. We now have 14 full-time employees, and again, we're getting ready to add more. The CDT was 68% complete back then, and now we're 95% complete. In about 3 months, we might move that needle to 96%. We've gone from an individual MOU with the U.S. Forest Service to an interagency MOU with all 3 federal agencies we work with, and potentially here in the near future, we'll have a memorandum of agreement with the Pueblo of Acoma, our first sovereign nation formalized relationship. We had 1 project in our first year, and now we have 21 projects that include daily stewardship projects in local communities, engaging local stewards. We started with a crowdfunding campaign with 600 donors. It raised $40,000. That's how we were able to hire myself as part-time. And now we have $1 million budget with almost 3,000 supporters and a Rolodex, so to speak, of 10,000 people. Back then in the old days, there wasn't even a sign or a map to hike the CDT. Now we have free download map sets, planning guides, and the CDT has officially been signed. We had 1 gateway community in Silver City, New Mexico, and now we have 19, and we're getting ready to bring on 3 more. In fact, while I'm in Lordsburg, is we're doing some planning to get Lordsburg to become a gateway community. Oops. Oh, well, and in general, we've just grown and it's been amazing. And I'll just go back one slide because the most important thing of all of this is through it all, we're remaining true to our roots. And this is actually a picture of our board meeting last month. So we're right back at the dinner table. We don't move too far at CDTC because we're not an empire builder. We don't have grand ideas of success or need for accolades. We just want to do good work that is in service of the CDT, its landscapes and communities, and all the people who love this place and call it home. And while we have come a long way from that first dining room table, we haven't forgotten our roots or the values upon which we are built. And I'm so personally proud to have been a part of that process. So now I'm all just messing up. In closing, I just want you all to remember what you're doing and getting ready to embark upon and have been embarking upon is noble work. It has the potential to create an even stronger connection to the outdoors than ever before that will benefit so many people you don't even know yet. I wish you luck. I wish you success. I wish you everything you need to be moving forward, and always, always feel free to reach out to myself or CDTC if we can ever help you in the future. Thank you again for inviting me today. I am grateful for the opportunity to have shared our story with you. And I know I've gone a little bit over time, but if there are questions, pop them in the chat, let me know. I'm always here and I will send a whole list of links for all the documents I shared. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Teresa. While I give everybody a minute to think about questions, maybe you could just let us know kind of what all the employees do. Are you hiring trail crews? Is it fundraising? Is it communications? And what are the 3 new ones?
Yeah, so we have, one of the things so as you mentioned, I worked for ATC and we had regional offices, and in those offices, people had like kind of silos. So what we did at CDTC is we put all those functions centrally, and then we have regional folks. So, and we also decentralize, so everyone lives along the trail. So like I live in Santa Fe, we have someone who lives in Las Cruces, someone lives in Helena, someone lives in Big Fork, Montana, and we have, we do have a bunch of folks in and around Golden. Our office is not very big. It's literally like 400 square feet, if maybe, and we're all just packed in there when we're all in there. So our staff, though, we have a trail lands program manager, a gateway program manager. We have a community program manager. We have a comms manager. We have a trail policy manager. We have a field programs manager and field programs director, development coordinator, CFO, myself, and then we have a New Mexico regional rep who we just hired, who actually happens to be a member of the Pueblo of Acoma. So having that relationship there with Indigenous communities has really been amazing, and everything. But the 3 positions we're hiring right now are all for field technicians. So working with the Forest Service, what we recognized is they don't have capacity for technical work sometimes. And what's happening is that as we're trying to complete the trail, no one knows who's on first, and no one knows what the priorities are, and no one has data in the infra system that actually is consistently good. So we committed to the Forest Service to hire a field technician. So we're piloting in New Mexico to have them actually collect all the actual on the ground feature and deficiency data. So then we can start to build a consistent project list that then we can all agree to is prioritized, working with the local field units and districts. So that's one position, and we're currently hiring for 2 crew leaders for all of our field projects and trainings, which if any of you are trying to do that right now, it's impossible. This economy is crazy and we cannot find people to fill these positions, and we're trying to pay them really well. So we've just learned that people are now starting to do bonuses. So we might have to do bonuses, which is, we'll figure it out. But yeah, so they're field positions, but we are getting ready to hire 2 in the near future, 2 fellow positions. One will be working on specifically policy issues, and the other one is going to be working in Colorado, helping us build stronger connections with state and local community governments. So really, again, expanding those relationships and how we show up with the CDT, recognizing that so many people, the divide itself, the fact that it has a trail is cool, but most people connect to the divide in many different ways, and it influences so many different things. So it's becoming an interesting place for us. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation this morning. Maybe we'll just take one more question from the chat, which is, how does the concept of a sustainable trail interact with the trail stewardship that that your organization does? And so, yeah, I guess maybe between the physical properties, but also the human relationships.
Yeah, it's also a changing place. Yeah, our field programs team, they are trained in field technical skills. So even though we don't do, we're not a youth corps, we partner with youth corps. We're not volunteers route to Colorado. We're not doing 50 billion projects. Our field folks are still very skilled in on the ground trail skills, because that is fundamental to our credibility. We have to know how to build a trail, to manage a trail, to sustain a trail. So yes, we are definitely building our trails if we're doing new construction. A lot of our work is actually in the planning and design, again, so we have a trail lands conservation program manager. Most of our work in this space, we are trying to get the Forest Service, who doesn't always have the skill on staff to lay out a trail well. We're doing that work for them well. So we're building it from the ground up, from that sustainable first design. We're doing that. And then we're, depending on who the partner is or what our ability is or capacity is, we'll do the actual construction. And then it's helping us build relationships beyond that. So we do all of those things. You leverage partnerships to do more of it, in particular in the physical trail construction or implementation, because we just can't do that. That would become 100% of our work. And there is so many other things to do when you manage a congressionally designated trail. Having said that, where we're really trying to move our relationships now is in that day-to-day trail stewardship. So a lot of the growth of our field programs is really in that trail steward program, that trail adopter maintainer program. So once the trail is built and we have people that's done, we find the people to actually maintain the trail, so that the Forest Service has that added capacity, because that's been a lot of our struggle too, is the agency is like, well, it's great if you build it, but who's going to maintain it? Who's going to clear the trees? Who's going to blah, blah. So that's where we're finding the other thing. And what we found in our relationship is we have been finding that we can add so much more capacity easier than the agency, or at least up to now. And I think the agencies are changing a little bit, but they're also willing to support us because we can leverage that ROI. I can go back to Congress and be like, they need more money because they need to help us do even more stuff. So we have a great case study for how that can work well. But we do everything. I mean, we want to do everything the best we can do with the best science and the best knowledge, especially when we're starting to add in indigenous communities and gain, like we were just out in, believe it or not, there's a place called Pie Town, New Mexico, and they actually have pie. They used to have 4 pie cafes. Now there's only 2, but that was the pandemic, but they're delicious pies. And it's right near, we have a whole section of the trail that is a 60-mile road walk. So we're looking at getting all the private lands resolved and then building the trail. So we were out doing some field scouting. We actually invited the Pueblo of Acoma and other tribes out with us, so that as we were laying out the trail or looking at potential places, they could help us identify cultural sites that weren't necessarily archaeological sites, but were important to them in a whole other layer, so that we're really starting to get out of like, well, this is this particular place is important. It's like the entire thing is important. So how do we sort of move a trail through that landscape, recognizing and honoring the importance of certain components of that landscape, but also being able to thread the needle of a trail that's going to disturb land, potentially expose people to other things. So, we try to do all of that. It's both human and it's science. It's the art and science, and we apply both of them all the time. It's a lot of work, but that's why we do discadas down here in New Mexico. We do a lot of discadas. We do a lot of eating and drinking.
Great. Well, we're going to say thanks very much for your wonderful presentation this morning. I just want to remind everybody that not only will we have a video of this, but we'll have a PDF of Teresa's presentation on our website. But thank you so much. Good luck with all your hiring. And we're going to transition right into talking about our long trail, but we appreciate your insights and vision and just the sharing that you've done this morning, and we'll definitely be in touch. So thanks again.
Thank you, Teresa. That was great. Yes,
Yeah.
really appreciating your time being here today.
Reach out anytime, and Miriam, I will send you all the links and you can share those with everybody.
Perfect.
So,
Thank
bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
So yeah, that was a great introduction to the next topic. Hi, everyone. My name is Mariam Medavaya. I'm with Alaska Trails, and the next session is directly related to the Alaska Lawn Trail. It's going to be a very interesting, I hope it's going to be productive, interactive, and hopefully we will incorporate what Teresa was saying. I think for me, the main aspect of her presentation was really focusing on the relational aspect of trail building. Building a trail is step one, but what comes next is hard work. That's what she said, and it seems really, really important in this process for us as well. I want to, before I start with the session, I want to give a little introduction, give thanks to our sponsors. Let's share screen. I want to thank our generous sponsors that made this the conference free this year. Thank you to Conoco Phillips Alaska, Alaska Pipeline Service Company, and Bureau of Land Management, and Alaska Recreation and Park Association, ARPA. These companies and organizations have donated to the Trails Conference for Alaska Trails and made your participation here free today. And also thank you for those who supported the Trails Conference and Alaska Trails through their donations. There are other ways. There's a donation opportunity on the Trails Conference webpage and other ways to donate on the Alaska Trails website. You could also volunteer with our Alaska Trails Stewards program. Perhaps you have done it in the past. There are opportunities to volunteer with Alaska Trails Stewards in the future this year as well. Thank you for those who donated through Pick, Click, Give this year. The window just closed a week ago. We hope that you consider us for your next year donation through Pick, Click, Give. I want to touch base on, just give you a little introduction to the day schedule for today. We just heard from Teresa Martinez. Now we're in the Alaska Lawn Trail work session, which will go until 11:30. And then after a short break, we'll have an update on the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. And then break for lunch. And at 1, we have updates from around the state. And closing the day is the panel on funding opportunities, infrastructure bill, EDA, and state capital budget. We hope you will stay with us today, and we have a full program tomorrow as well, Friday, which I don't have here, sorry, but you can find it on our website. And with that, I want to introduce my colleague, Chris Beck, who will start us off.
So maybe I'll go ahead and share my screen, Mariam.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And while Chris is doing that, I'll just say that he and Mariam started about 2.5 years ago, and Chris and Mariam have really been the backbone of the Alaska Long Trail and the efforts there. So we're really excited to have you all here today, but Alaska Trails has really been benefiting from their hard work, and that for Chris has meant volunteering this entire time on the Long Trail effort. So take it away, Chris.
Sure. Are people seeing the beginning of a PowerPoint slideshow?
Yep. You can hit slideshow if you wanted it to go full screen.
Yeah, I was just about to do that exactly.
Awesome.
Thank you. So I have to say, I feel a little bit like, I don't know, it's like I'm following Bob Dylan or Bonnie Raitt, having picked up the guitar last week. But no, that was a super inspiring presentation. And I hope that what I'll share shows that we're heading that direction, although we are very much, we're not even really in the first inning. We might be in the pregame warm-up on this ambitious vision for a long trail. So Mariam and I are going to do a short kind of overview of a little bit of the background of the long trail, and then Mariam will talk briefly about the next steps and how we're going to do a lot of those things that Teresa was just describing, of reaching out and working with partners. So I'm going to go through this kind of quick, and then what's going to follow those two sections, as Mariam maybe gave you a sense of, is that we're going to have breakout sessions and do a lot of listening to your folks' ideas about this project, about the routes, about the uses, etc. So I think as much as this might look like, and Steve is generous saying, you know, Chris and Mariam are big drivers here, it really has been a collaborative process from the get-go. And so in each of the segments along this ambitious proposed trail, there's been a large and growing set of people, and that continues to expand. This is actually maybe a year almost out of date. So we've got a process that sets up us listening and learning from the people who care about, who know about trails, know about communities along the length of the route. It's a proposed 500-mile route, Seward to Fairbanks. Our grand ambition, but this is a pretty grand start, would be to have it continue north, have it go through Southeast Alaska, but this is where the most pressing and immediate energy is going. And as far as what the hopes are and for what this will achieve, you can see the list here. You know, just opening more opportunities, motorized, non-motorized, multimodal, make it easier, more inviting to be active and healthy outside. Health is a driver in the spirit of what Teresa shared, really being respectful and helping to celebrate and to the degree possible, maintain and support the diverse cultural traditions of Alaska. And then a big driver, and it's just a pragmatic one in our efforts to gain the support of the decision makers in the state, is to focus on the significant economic benefits that bringing more visitors, more spending to Alaska, and a long trail has kind of a magical, attractive quality. And so that's linking it to the communities and towns as they see fit along the length of the trail as a central goal. And then the last one is that stewardship goal of celebrating and sustaining the things that make Alaska unique. And on my screen anyway, those are obscured, so I'm going to move my panel. You know, our wild places, our healthy ecosystems, the quality of recreation, you know, the fact that you can be with people or you can get away, all those things are part of what we're trying to achieve through this long trail. And I'm going to hit advance here. So why this specific route? Got to pause and more than tip a hat, really credit a handful of folks, Tony Knowles, Pat Porchot, Jonathan Christ-Tompkins, who really launched this notion that wouldn't it be great if Alaska had its own long trail, and initially thought about a route between the North Slope and Valdez along the pipeline. Turned out there were some challenges around that, and switched gears to this route, this 500-mile route, Seward to Fairbanks. The advantages of this are those that are listed here. It's on public land. There's a lot of interest in those public landowners, not exclusively, but the majority is on public land. The opportunity to connect to communities and bring the benefits that that can bring, the fact that maybe 20, 25%, depending how you defined existing trails, is already there. It's wild, you know, it's Alaska, but it's within reach of communities, of highways, which can help reduce the cost of building and maintaining. It's a beautiful country. Probably nobody's surprised by that statement. And in that there's the opportunity to build, and we'll elaborate on this further, a braided system of trails. And you can begin to see by the places where the dots are moving in more than one route. And I think that's going to be a unique element of an Alaskan long trail. I don't have my cursor in play. So the vision, and I'm going to credit Wes Hoskins, who I think is on the on this Zoom right now, who's really urged us to do some fundamental thinking about how we explain this emerging concept to the world, and to be explicit about our goals. And so a fair amount of wordsmithing and thought has gone into this language, and you can see it there. The notion of world-class trail system connecting those 500 plus miles of the terrain, the communities, Pacific to the interior, and then really embracing the many ways Alaskans do recreate outdoors. And I think the initial vision might have been a bit narrower than that, but the more we think about it, the more we talk to people, it's clear this is an Alaskan long trail, and Alaskans like to get outside in a lot of different ways. And we're not just accepting that, we support that. That's a powerful part of Alaska life. So this may have winter trails that are snow machines, dog sleds. It can have ATV trails in places where the landowners support that use and the landscape allows it. And then the final phrase in there is, many ways to support the life of our residents, and then to bolster the Alaskan economy by creating a world-class attraction that will bring in people from all over the world. I think the experiences with long trails around the planet shows that these are powerful attractors. So because all these words I think can get a little abstract, wanted to share, if I can conjure up with words and an image, some segments that this trail might offer. And a piece that to me, for a variety of reasons, particularly exciting is, what if it was possible to travel north of Talkeetna? And maybe to illustrate this notion, we need to be responsive to community. That area immediately north of Talkeetna has a number of folks who've lived there, remote cabins. They have some understandable questions like, do we really want a whole lot of people whizzing by in their snow machines? So maybe for a while that travel north out of Talkeetna might be by train. These are the kind of questions that we'll be working on in the future. But there is the famous Curry Camp, the place that for a long period of time prior to the Parks Highway being built was a popular year-round destination. And there used to be a bridge over the Big Susitna River. From that could be sort of the backdoor entry into, the front best row, best house, best seats in the house view of the Alaska Range. An image of that up there on the new Kasugi Curry Ridge Trail system. That's something that could be part of this long trail. Way up further north between Nenana and Fairbanks is the Tanana Valley State Forest. The vision up there is that there are a number of logging roads already in place. Connecting a few of those could expand what already exists, which is a year-round trail system that is used by ATV, by four-wheelers, on foot, biking, snow machine, through those beautiful rolling hills between Nenana and Fairbanks. And so I'm hoping you're picturing beyond the broad statements, just how cool this thing could be. I think that's what got so many people so excited about it. So another segment is to take off north out of Seward. That's the southern trek of the Iditarod. It's the portion of the trail that has the most segments complete. Stop off in a community like Moose Pass. Continue up the ambitious segment of this trail that is not yet there, but where there's progress starting to be made up the 20-mile valley off the Seward Highway, up over beautiful Berry Pass. That's this image. You can see the tent and the two little people standing there, down over what's proposed to be a new bridge over Glacier Creek, and then up over Crow Pass and all the way to Eagle River. That would be a cool trail, and that one's not that far from being real. A final piece is going back into how this is a multi-use braided vision, is that you could take off out of Big Lake, and there's actually a pretty good trail system. I mean, that's an understatement. There's an established trail system that runs north up through the valley on the west side of the Big Susitna River, but it could use help as more and more use goes in. There needs to be more money to help with the maintenance, the signage, the search and rescue, clearing the trees that could fall down, building bridges. So that's another piece of this big vision. And so broad bipartisan support, I think that the driving message that I hear from listening to Teresa is what we're in the process of doing our best to build, which is to have formal support by a lot of groups. You can see the long list. We just recently got the Anchorage Assembly to pass a resolution like those passed in other boroughs along the way. Tourism groups, user groups, a lot of folks are rallying. This I didn't realize had the fancy incremental reveal, but we're starting to really build this wide, deep coalition. Lots of folks are stepping forward and saying, how can I help? This is great. Here's some money. The Race Across Alaska, which we greatly appreciate, helped us raise money to do this planning work we're describing. We're getting more and more media. There's been editorials, articles in different papers. The governor last year introduced funding for the Long Trail in a general obligation bond. The legislature approved that amount of money. Ultimately, unfortunately, that was vetoed more, I would argue, as part of the unresolved issues around Alaska's fiscal situation. And we're back with the legislature, which Mariam will probably talk about, with another set of proposals for this current session. Rasmussen Foundation and some other nonprofits have stepped in and say this is a good idea, worthy of attention, and that's exciting. So with that, I pass it to Mariam, and I will stop sharing and let you take over and talk a little bit about now what.
Sounds good.
Nice slide, by the way, Mariam.
Thanks, Chris. Let's see. Okay, so yes, now what? It's a great concept, a lot of support. Let's see, so next steps include, so this year, 2022, we are intending, and by we, I mean, not just Alaska Trails, but the Alaska Lawn Trail Coalition, which comprises a lot of partners from Seward to Fairbanks. So we're planning to coalesce regional working groups that will include diverse stakeholders from every region, from every locality, community members, trails organizations, nonprofits, local governments, federal agencies, state agencies, to talk about planning and route mapping, use, seasonality, interests. So yeah, so this work we envision to happen this year, and today's work session is kind of a launch point for that. I mentioned earlier that we will break off into regional groups very shortly and talk about options, looking at actual maps. And this work continues. This is, again, just the first kind of a launch meeting, and we are hoping to have more Zoom meetings, maybe in-person meetings as the year goes on, and perhaps into next year as well. And this summer, we're hoping, and next summer as well, we're hoping for some ribbon cuttings for projects that will be funded, hopefully with state legislative funding, perhaps with federal funding. We're not picky, we'll take what we can get. And hopefully on the next year, actually, well, in this year as well, we will have on the ground trail layout on some segments and trail building. Right. So still on the next steps. So as I mentioned, so we're planning, next steps are the planning and building trail segments. That's one big area. And as I mentioned, we'll be working with partners from the 5 Lawn Trail regions. It's basically what I just said, sorry, it appears here again on the slide. So Alaska Lawn Trail Coalition, again, it's a partnership of many entities along the trail. We have representatives from trails organizations, local governments, federal agencies, state parks. So it's a diverse mix. And then regional working groups will be broader bodies of constituents and a variety of stakeholders, larger groups. And the idea is the Alaska Lawn Trail Coalition is going to guide the process of bringing together the regional working groups in every region. And today, during the breakout sessions, we have representatives of the Alaska Lawn Trail Coalition facilitating those discussions. So you will get to meet some of those folks today. So the next area that we need to work on is funding. And we are right now we're focusing on the state of Alaska capital budget for fiscal year 2023, as well as working with Senator Murkowski's office on securing funding through annual appropriations for Long Trail projects. And I will talk about the current state of Alaska capital budget that we're looking for funding from. Yeah, we're looking to include the set of Alaska Long Trail projects into the capital budget through the state of Alaska. So these are the projects that we have submitted with our partners along the length of the trail. Yeah, there are 15 projects, and these projects range from non-motorized use to motorized use, from construction dollars to planning dollars. You can see more on our website. If you go to Alaska Trails website, find the Long Trail page, and you can go from there to find out more. And I will put links in the chat as well later on. So we're asking the state legislature to allocate close to $15 million for these 15 projects. Let's see. And today, for this session, this morning, our goals are there are many goals. I hope we can achieve them all. First is clarifying the process and next step on the Long Trail. That's what we're trying to do right now, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end to talk about these more. And to collect ideas to fill in missing segments. And those ideas would come from you in the breakout sessions. And three, we have the goal is to identify challenges and issues for missing segments. For example, those challenges and issues could be terrain, use, restrictions, land ownership, etc. And finally, we want to collect suggestions for desired use and seasonality for some suggested routes. So that is the plan for today. The breakout groups will take, I have to go back on the 45 minutes because I think we need to shorten those. How about 35, because we started a little bit late. I think 35 minutes would be still plenty of time. Sorry about that, but if we will have opportunity to add your input after the sessions are over as well. I'll send some links to do that. So for Fairbanks, we'll have 5 breakout sessions for 5 regions along the proposed route. In Fairbanks, the facilitator is Brian Wright with the Fairbanks North Star Borough. The Denali Borough is facilitated by Teresa Floberg from Denali Borough, and Matsu is facilitated by Wes Hoskins and Taylor Raftery from the Matsu Trails and Parks Foundation, and Anchorage is facilitated by Chris Beck and Xavier Lopez from Alaska Trails, and Kenai will be led by Haley Johnston and from Alaska Trails and Will Brennan from the Glacier Ranger District of the Chugach National Forest of the United States Forest Service. Thank you, facilitators, Alaska Long Trail Coalition representative who are going to lead these breakout sessions. So we have guiding questions, which I will post in the chat, and these questions are also will be on in the map boards that we will see in a few minutes. And so these are questions that you might want to think about when you provide your input during the breakout sessions. I'm not going to read through them right now. You can see them on the screen, and I will put them in the chat as well. Some reminders about Zoom etiquette. Please keep your mic muted if you're not speaking, and you can have your camera on or off. It's really up to you. I think the Zoom meeting was set up in such a way that your video was off when you joined, but you're welcome to turn it on at any time. Please type your questions or comments in chat. And please raise your hand if you want to speak. There's a little, let's see. There's a button that says reactions on the bottom of your Zoom controls. And you should be able to choose a reaction that has a little hand if you want to provide verbal input. The facilitators will be calling on those folks who have their hand raised in the meeting. So, and also just FYI, this meeting will be likely recorded. It depends on the facilitators. Facilitators, please choose if you want your breakout session to be recorded. You would have to press the record button and choose to record it on your local computer or on Zoom cloud. And let's see. So in a few seconds, actually, you know what? Let me stop right here, and I will let my coworker Xavier talk give a little bit of an introduction about the maps that we're going to see. Xavier, are you up for that?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Xavier Lopez, and I am the GIS consultant for Alaska Trails. I've been helping them develop maps for the Alaska Long Trail. And I just wanted to quickly run through some of the maps that we're going to see in a moment here. They're a lot more detailed than the dotted maps that were just shown on the presentation. And the whole point is to kind of, again, get your input on routes that are going through some of these lands. And one thing that I want to preface is that I know that, you know, seeing a line go through a map can be a huge statement, especially to some people. And I just want to emphasize that this is for visual representation, and it is more so to get conversations started and going. You know, if you don't agree with the route that's on here, we're more than happy to hear your input on why, you know, a route shouldn't, you know, go through a certain section. That's what this is for. So one thing I wanted to do before we jump into this is get everyone familiarized with the maps, especially the symbology that's going on there, because it's kind of a lot of colors going on. So first, I'll start off with the Alaska Long Trail route. We have a few suite of colors here where blue is going to be existing routes and existing routes that may need major work. Specifically, these routes have been identified to get the long trail from point A to point B through such terrain. So for example, here, we could see in the Anchorage map, there's Crow Pass, where we could see that a section here, Crow Pass, needs some major work. Yellow will be designated as interim connection, where this isn't an established trail, rather it is just a way to get from one trail to another because there's no other designated way to get there. So for example, in yellow here, you can see that it's marked as a street that gets you to the trailhead for the Ram Valley Trail, which is an existing trail. Going on, there's an orange route that's construction ready and construction ready road projects. Construction ready road projects will be dashed with some gray in it. So for an example here, I will come down to the Turnagain Arm. And we can see that there's a few road projects going on here. Specifically, this orange one around the bend of the Turnagain Arm is a proposed AKDOT route that will be a multimodal path. However, you can see that eventually it turns into a dash line, which essentially it's a road project that doesn't have a trail planned or connected to it at the moment. Maybe a trail can be advocated for in the future. Yeah, so moving on to other type of routes. Sorry if it's a bit laggy on here. The second suite are kind of proposed and candidate routes, and the between the two, it gets a little limbo-y, but a proposed route is more so a route that has been proposed and has been acknowledged by land managers and owners as a potential route that can connect the long trail. So for example, here is a pink route showing a proposed route that is the Eagle River Greenbelt. It's specifically Chugach State Park ID proposed route as 223A. You could go on their website and you can see the alignment that they have. Where a candidate route is more so a limbo of existing trails that may be considered for a route, or can be social trails that aren't necessarily a route, but they're commonly used. So for example, many people have taken a hike from Rand Valley to Eklutna Lake. And right here in the candidate routes, you can see that these are some of the tracks that I picked up. They're GPS routes that people have submitted, and I have just displayed here for you. And then next comes a few of the infrastructure just to get everyone oriented while looking at this map. I have shown highways. Major roadways have been bolded in gray, where minor roads are just kind of skinnier. Railroads are good for orientation. In dotted black lines, you'll see trails. These are just trails for reference. So maybe you would say, hey, maybe this route should go onto this trail rather than this one over here, just to get everyone oriented. And then along the highways and roads, I have provided mileposts at every 10 miles. Just so that we can get a starting point, so that when you tell your facilitator, like, hey, I know this route from mile point 10 to mile point 20, we can have an idea of where to go. And then in the background, it's very colorful. It's the land ownership parcels. This data I got from the Bureau of Land Management. And in pink, you'll see private. Green is Alaska Native land. Purple is local government. This yellowish beige color is state parks and state forests. And brown is going to be federal park and forests. Blue is going to be Bureau of Land Management land. And gray is going to be any other federal land, whether it's Department of Defense or any sort of other federal department. And then looking at boundaries, we'll see here that in brown, we have the national park and US Forest Service boundaries. In this yellowish color, we have a state park boundary. And in these kind of slash boxes, they're going to be state game refuges. So for example, Palmer Haight Flats, and going down here in Anchorage, sorry, I'm blanking, Potter Marsh, this Potter Marsh area.
Hey, Xavier, can I interrupt you for a second? Brian just reminded me that there is a window of 12 minutes. If anybody wants to call in to the Senate Finance Committee before 10:30 from the interior region, from Denali Borough or Fairbanks area, and in support of the Lawn Trail projects to the Senate Finance Committee, you can do that in the next 12 minutes. They accept calls until 10:30. I'm going to put information on that in the chat right now. It's there.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Miriam. That's extremely awesome. Okay, so proceeding on there, I have a lot of labels going on, and they're specifically labeled in certain ways, as you can see here. And if any of this gets confusing, you can always ask your facilitator to come down to the legend to explain anything, or if you're maybe a little confused on any of the symbology that's going on here. But overall, if there's any discrepancies in any of these maps, I have provided my email on all of these maps. It's xlopez@gmail.com. And if there are any discrepancies or anything you'd want to email me about, please let me know, and I will update the maps or resolve any issues. And with that, I think we could head into the Zoom sessions, the breakout sessions.
Great. Thank you so much, Xavier. Yeah. All right. There we go. All right. So in a few moments, you will see an invitation to join a breakout room. It should look like this. It says join a breakout room above the breakout rooms controls. And you can click join, and you can also